are sitting over huge cash pile, probably which is unprecedented. You look at Japan. I think if I'm not mistaken, probably over $2 trillion of cash with the corporates. Or look at US. The top companies of the world, whether it is Apple or it is Google or all the technology companies, they are also sitting over huge cash pile. Look at Korea. The Korean corporate profit is far more than what we could imagine, and also their total cash with them, particularly the foreign exchange reserves, because they operate globally, would be in excess of even the cash reserves of some of the countries in the world. What does it mean? It means that corporate profits are expanded, corporates are doing well, but not necessarily that has resulted into a better economic environment for the global economy. So the challenge is, while we must promote the private sector, how do you make sure that this benefits the society as a whole? How this private sector now will be able to put money and invest into new projects which will spur the economic growth of the world? And when we make that investment, we should be very careful and cautious about why we invest. If we invest only into areas where not only profits are created, but the jobs are not, it again is going to create a sort of a different type of a model which may not be sustainable in the long run. So how do you create new environment in which the investing company, investing country benefits a lot? They have to, because that's their money, but also helps the rest of the world and rest of the economy. Is it possible? It is definitely possible, and that's why we have been discussing in G20 2 or 3 areas. One is infrastructure. Infrastructure is one sector which will benefit the global economy as a whole. When you make investments into India's infrastructure, which is probably the largest infrastructure destination, investment destination for any country in the world, will actually create jobs not only in India, and not only the benefit of that infrastructure will happen to India, but also to many countries who are making that investment. Just imagine if you make investment and India's need is about $1 trillion in the next 5 years, the bankers in Western world will also benefit. They'll create new jobs because they'll find out new financial instrument to make the investment. The lawyers, of course, the services in they will make job. But the infrastructure creation, the supply chain is such whereby lot of stuff that is going to be invested into India's infrastructure also will be manufactured somewhere else. If you are going to put up a port in India, maybe some of the equipment needed for the port will also be imported from some other parts of the world. That will create job in that country where there is going to be manufacturing. And if you don't make that investment in India's infrastructure, I'm just saying India, but anywhere in the world, how you will create job in the manufacturing sector or the services sector, which in not necessarily in the same geography but somewhere else, will happen if you don't make that investment. So therefore, we have been strongly saying, India has been very strongly proposing this, that infrastructure should be one of the key areas of activity for investment. You need to invest, point is well taken, but where do you invest is also important. And therefore, this is something which we must really think very seriously about it. The second issue, which is again part of a socio-economic issue, is an issue related to climate change. If you really look at it, the new investment that must happen into sectors which will be climate proof, which will not create new emissions that are necessary in the world. Unfortunately, because of this crisis and post-2008, we have been saying that climate change issue has been relegated to not to a priority issue. And at a time when all countries are suffering from climate change and the adverse effect of that very seriously. India, this year we didn't have the monsoon as much as we wanted it, as much as we desired. But what is the cause? We call it El Nino effect. What is the cause of that El Nino effect? We always agree that it is something to do with climate change, and therefore maybe the warming of oceans and others, which happens normally. But the intensity, the severity has certainly increased as a result of climate change. So therefore, you make investments, you must make investments into the sectors which will not create the type of challenges that we are facing today as a result of climate change. So this will be a win-win situation. We'll be able to reduce the emissions, as well as we'll be able to create jobs, we'll be able to create new infrastructure, we'll be able to create. So alongside infrastructure investment, second issue will be important, will be the issue of clean investments, clean energy investments and others, that keeping in mind the climate change issues, we must do as a globe. Thirdly, which I agreed and which I have been saying, that are global supply chains. The global supply chains are extremely important to create jobs in other countries. We have been saying that, in fact, it's happening already. If you look at it, some of the brands of the top world companies, they are only brand holders, like Nike. They don't manufacture much in their country. Apple manufactures most of its product not in US but outside, though the Apple is an American company. And therefore, supply chain should be really created in a way that will create jobs in other countries. And while doing that, that point is accepted and is happening. How do you promote the small and medium enterprises in doing that? And we accepted this as a fact. Even in Silicon Valley, the real innovation always happens in SMEs. The large companies that we see today, and I mentioned some of them, maybe Apple or Google or even Microsoft, they started as a very small enterprise, startups. They were small companies. And that's why they grow big. Now they acquire, these companies acquire smaller companies to innovate further. But the innovation largely happens in small companies as well. And therefore, developing supply chain is good idea for creating employment, but also good idea to actually innovate the global economy, which will become more productive, more innovative, and therefore more rewarding to the society as a whole. So I think these are the few issues which are of social concern. We must integrate them into deciding how do we make sure that these issues are properly addressed. Climate change is standalone issue, very important. We are going to have the COP in Paris just after this, in fact next month, after the following month of G20 summit in December, and not very far from Turkey. And therefore I think we really need to focus on that climate change in G20, but I'm talking about making investments alone, keeping in mind all the issues for economic betterment, but also which will produce the far better result is something which we need to do. And I think on the first point, if I just mention, which Mr. Das I'm sure will address it in a more articulate way, is that the India as a country, we are affected by the policies which goes beyond our country. We see the stock market volatility, which has nothing to do with the fundamentals of Indian economy. This happens because of something which is so extraneous to India. And therefore, we really need to take into account when we frame the monetary policy, the economic policy, how do you take the concerns of a country like India into consideration is something very important. Therefore, we need some sort of a proper arrangement with that. We have an issue related to regulation, and I think that was an issue which was always on the table. And as mentioned, the banks too big to fail. I was saying that the challenge is for some countries is too big to fail. But there are challenges for countries is we are too small to survive. So how do you make sure? There are companies which are too small and therefore they cannot survive. We are trying to protect something which is too big to fail. You must protect, but also make sure that the small who are not able to survive because of the sheer lack of critical size, how do you make them survive? And that is what will going to be finally a sustainable issue, and therefore we must try to look into that as well. We have implementation, and I think we must really thank our Honourable Prime Minister. Our Economic Affairs Secretary was also the Secretary of Revenue, just before he became the Secretary of this. And he will tell you more, our Prime Minister led a campaign in G20 to address black money issue. And to do that, we talked about two important issues. One is, of course, a taxation-related issue, which is BEPS, base erosion and profit sharing. The other one, very important, was automatic information sharing. Just imagine this automatic information sharing now is confined to G20 alone, but as we go along, bilaterally and others, we can actually have many countries joining in, will actually, in a long run, is going to, not long run, immediately, as soon as we start signing these protocols, will be able to address the black money issue very well. And to make that, which is the priority of this Indian government, and therefore our Prime Minister has very forcefully had put it in Australia, the need to actually address issues, the black money issue, and therefore this is now become a center stage. I hope the United Nations take a lead and try to create a global protocol so that no country will be working as a tax haven, will not be able to lose the money rightfully belonging to the country where the income started. So that's not just a BPS issue, but going beyond it. And therefore, I think that again will be an extremely important issue related to us. As I said, income inequality is a major issue. If you just having a huge capital formation at a level of few corporates, and that again creates huge cash pile in those countries, and not being able to invest, will not really benefit from long-term benefit of this whole process. See, we must be very conscious of the fact that many of these large companies who have such large cash reserves, where do they accumulate it? It is not only from the country where they actually are registered, but also because of the global operation. And therefore, the global operations that resulted into creating this, they must also find out a global concern and try to invest in the right place so that they will benefit. And I think that's the primary thing. We'll always want that these countries and the companies should benefit. But if you can actually result into new economic equality, that's something which will be necessary. So I think China is already thinking about shifting from investment-led model to consumption-led model. I think global economy as a whole, we must think about a new model of development in which inclusiveness will become a new catchword. Creating jobs will become an imperative of any new economic policy. Making sure that we create a proper atmosphere globally wherein all the countries really benefit as much as they could will become an important issue, and the social issues will become also an integral part of economic policy. In fact, even in Australia, our Prime Minister was very focused on saying that social issues like poverty and others also must get prominence in the discussion. And that's how we got that into the table. We actually had a very good information on that. In fact, even that became an important and top agenda of the summit in Australia. I hope as we go along in the next few years, we'll be able to look into issues. But as I said, this is an extremely important summit because this is probably far more important than any other summit of G20 in the past, because the first time we are now realizing at that particular time what are the cause of the problem. Today even we are trying to find out what is the cause, how to deal with it, and therefore it's a very important event. I am sure India will take a lead, as we have always done, to make sure that we believe that we are part of a process of G20 as well as many multilateral organizations, and we always feel that G20 has a limited role. We should not use this as a forum to subvert many of these global institutions that are existing, like United Nations, whether it is the negotiations for climate change, which happens under the UNFCCC forum, or the WTO, or many others. But we always realize also that G20 is an important platform to promote ideas and to play a leadership role in making sure that G20 countries take a leadership position which will help the rest of the world, all the 7+ billion people living in different parts of the world, and they also are not ignored, their interests are properly protected. So India will always continue to be an active partner, but also making sure that we address the concerns of not only our own country, but globe as a whole. We will be a part of a solution in a way that will help the poor of the world, the people who deserve more help, and that's what we'll continue to do. I'm sure ICRIER will continue to organize this event in a way to provide leadership to this particular cause. I'm very happy that after me, my good friend and colleague is going to speak. So Mr. Das will cover all the points, which I'm sure I'm not so competent to do as much as he is. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister, for those very passionate and stimulating remarks. As usual, I think our G20 conferences in the past as well, the ones that we've organized, have been inaugurated by the Sherpa, and this one too. So we are keeping with that tradition. And in keeping with the tradition of the quality of the inaugural speech, Mr. Suresh Prabhu has met those benchmarks, if not better those benchmarks. So thank you very much. Unfortunately, the Minister has to leave because the Prime Minister has called a meeting which he will attend. So we'll perhaps have another opportunity to take questions, to kind of get him to respond to questions, maybe at another opportunity, at another conference that ICRIER organizes, because as you know, he wears many hats. And as I was saying in my opening remarks, that we are doing a project with the railways on an issue that the Minister mentioned, which is such an important issue that is facing not only India but the world, which is climate change. So we are working with the railways on a project on decarbonization. So we'll have other opportunities to interact with the Minister. But before he goes, let me profusely and profoundly thank him for having come here and inaugurated this conference in a manner, as I said, that kept with the benchmarks that ICRIER has established in the past G20 conference. So can I request you to please give him a round of applause for... Thank you, Minister, and our G20 Sherpa as well. May I now request, without taking any more of your time, following from what the Minister and the Sherpa said, may I request Mr. Shaktikanta Das to give his keynote address. As you know, Mr. Das was recently appointed as Secretary, Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance, Government of India, and he's held many positions in the Government of India. His achievements, his bio is in the folder. Thank you, Mr. Das, and may we welcome him with a round of applause as well.
Good morning. The Honourable Railway Minister has really set the agenda for today and tomorrow. And I think he has captured all the relevant issues which today is engaging the attention of the global community. And he has listed about 8 or 9 points which really represent the core of where the G20 as a group should be looking and where the other countries also together should be looking. He made a very important observation at the end that while G20 is taking the initiative in restoring, maintaining the world order, in seeing that there is equitable growth all around, to ensure that there is sustainable growth at the same time, the other institutions which represent the other countries not represented in G20 also is taken care of. And I think he has also very rightly emphasized on the issues of employment, infrastructure, etc. So thank you once again, Dr. Kathuria, for inviting me. Dean, Asian Institute, the ADBI Institute, distinguished members of audience, ladies and gentlemen, members of media and friends. I'm extremely happy to be participating in this event in what constitutes the first public event I'm taking part after assuming charge as the Secretary Economic Affairs. The G20 has been, as was pointed out by the Railway Minister, post-2008, the G20 has really come to the center stage of the global economic thinking and the global policy thinking and the various policy initiatives. It has really made substantial progress. The focus on infrastructure came up somewhere, if I recall correctly, in Australia, and today we have the new development bank which is being set up. We have the Chinese initiated AIIB, the Asian Investment and Infrastructure Bank, that is also coming up. So there is a realization that we need to spend more on infrastructure and other issues which the G20 had taken up and which were again articulated by India, our finance minister, with regard to the coordinated and the structured approach in managing the monetary policies of various countries, and the Honourable Prime Minister last year in Australia, when he articulated the problems of unaccounted money, black money, and how to deal with this problem and how to give a push to the whole idea of automatic exchange of information. In fact, automatic exchange of information is one concrete initiative which the G20 has initiated, and really we are moving to a system, we are moving to a structure where it is today taking shape. Today, if we look at the global situation, there is uncertainty and there is volatility all around. The uncertainty